Welcome to this episode of Social Distance Television, and the first full week of April 2020, the week that Surgeon General Jerome Adams warned, quote, will be our Pearl Harbor moment, the hardest and saddest week for most Americans' lives.
We all feel your cabin fever and sense of being cooped in. We really do. But please, stay home and stay safe.
I'm Devin Handy.
And I'm Elena Pittman.
And you're watching SDTV. On today's show, we'll visit Antarctica with the Science Desk, get a binge-worthy book suggestion, meet our first Hidden Talent contestant, and catch a throwback with Stella. But first, let's see what's in the news.
This week, we have seen some truly grim milestones. We have more than 400,000 cases of COVID-19 in the U.S. alone. More than 10,000 American deaths have been attributed to the disease. The number of confirmed cases in Montgomery County has doubled in the last week, topping 700. The state of Maryland is now turning vehicle inspection stations into COVID-19 testing centers.
It's impossible to grasp it all, and it's also very difficult to know what news stories to focus on. With respect to all the news we cannot cover in this short a time, we bring you 3 news pieces.
First, President Trump and medical experts continue to disagree on the effectiveness and proper recommendation for hydroxychloroquine, an anti-malarial drug in the fight against COVID-19.
President Trump recommended combining hydroxychloroquine with a common antibiotic to, quote, kill certain things that you don't want living within your body. President Trump also recommended that doctors, nurses, and first responders take hydroxychloroquine as a preventative, explaining, quote, what do you have to lose?
Dr. Anthony Fauci, the government's top infectious disease expert, explained that the research on hydroxychloroquine isn't sufficient. And Dr. Patrice Harris, president of the American Medical Association, says she would not prescribe hydroxychloroquine at this point to anyone as a preventative for COVID-19.
Next, the number of universities and colleges temporarily or permanently suspending SAT and ACT score requirements has risen over the last week. Last week, the always influential University of California school system temporarily suspended testing requirements for fall of 2021.
Lastly, the Washington League for Transparency and Ethics sued Fox News on Thursday, saying the popular news channel, quote, knowingly disseminated false, erroneous, and incomplete information as to the dangers of the virus and the rapidity with which the virus spreads. Given that the average age of Fox's viewers is 65, the league argued that the misinformation put members of the public at risk, discouraging social distancing and other, quote, effective mitigation efforts. That's all for this episode. Check back for more updates on current events.
According to the Washington Post, every continent has recorded at least one case of COVID-19. Every continent, that is, except for Antarctica, which happens to be today's Science Desk topic. Let's pass it over to Harry, who will describe how climate change has been affecting king penguins long before COVID-19 ever existed.
Welcome. I'm Harry Holden Brown from the SDTV Science Desk, reporting on a non-COVID related topic, because let's face it, we all need a break. In further depressing news, king penguins have disappeared from a vital nesting ground on Île-aux-Cochons, an island in the Southern Ocean. According to researchers, the colony has seen a 90% decrease in population in recent years, with no evidence of land predation and sick or dead penguins. The scientists can't point to island-specific causes for the decline. Instead, they found that climate change has moved their food source, lanternfish, further south as colder Antarctic waters retreat toward the South Pole. This retreat would mean much longer trips for penguins nesting on Île-aux-Cochons, leaving chicks vulnerable to starvation and adults to increased stress and predation. Satellite images have shown no evidence of penguins going elsewhere to breed, so scientists think these majestic animals have simply disappeared, a bad harbinger for penguin populations and the impacts of climate change on our natural world.
Thank you, Harry. If you're spending way too much time staring out windows these days, we hope you're at least respecting your neighbor's privacy. Of course, we also hope you don't have neighbors like Anna Fox does. What Fox, the agoraphobic main character in A.J. Finn's best-selling novel, The Woman in the Window, witnesses, will keep you on the edge of your seat. And according to Emma and Lily, the edge of your seat is exactly where you'll stay until you power read your way through this binge-worthy thriller. Emma and Lily, take it away.
Hi, welcome to Quarantine Must Reads. I'm Emma, and 6 feet away from me is
Lily. Hi.
This week we brought The Woman in the Window
By A.J. Finn.
I just read this book during quarantine because Lily had recommended it to me earlier, and we thought we would make a little segment talking about why you should also read this book and why it's worth your quarantine time.
So it's a suspense thriller mystery. It is so good. It is so thrilling, and I read it in like 2 hours, and I think Emma also read it in 2 hours. I literally couldn't put it down.
Yeah, I think the most interesting part about it is that it's realistic. So it's a thriller, but it's a psychological thriller as opposed to being kind of like a physical thriller, even though there are aspects of, like physical horror in it. I think that it's like a lot of it is mental, and I think that allows everyone to be able to relate to it because it's kind of a situation that anyone could fall into. And I think the plot twists are like really, really good.
Yeah, and it puts like a really interesting perspective on like who we are in the neighborhood and like how other people are seen by like neighbors and how we don't really understand like how much we understand about everything else that we see from our own homes.
And I think it also puts perspective into like the way our perceptions of other people's lives and how like completely different they can be, and how like we are so easily misled. And how like the facade of what someone puts on is so easily manipulated. And I think that's like really interesting part of the book. It's from the perspective of a young psychologist, just to give a little bit of a background story, who lives alone in a big apartment in New York that she used to live in with her husband and daughter, who no longer live with her. And that's kind of one of the storylines, like how did she end up there? And she's very introverted. She keeps to herself.
Agoraphobic.
Yeah, and agoraphobia is when you have the fear of leaving your house and kind of going outside and being in public. It kind of tackles not only like the realness of like agoraphobia, and that's something that a lot of people struggle with, but also kind of like it ties in a thriller element.
And it is now a movie, so after you read it, you can watch the movie. I haven't watched it yet.
I haven't either.
Yeah, but the book is amazing, and it's like it may seem long, but it goes by so fast.
Yeah, I honestly started reading this because I thought it could, take up a big chunk of my quarantine time. It is 427 pages, and I finished it in one morning.
It's totally worth it.
So it's really, really good, and it's an easy read too. It's not difficult.
It's not hard to follow. Emma and I rate this, I'd say 5 out of 5.
Yeah, I would give this 5 stars, and we'll keep you guys updated with what we're reading and what you guys should be reading if you want to stay tuned. Thanks for coming to sit a nice
watching.
Social distance away from us.
Last week, we asked you to sing, show off some dance moves, or break out some spoken words. Basically, flex as only you know how for a hidden talent competition. You send us your video, and we'll mask your identity. Basically, bring your best, and we'll do the rest. Each week, we bring you a new competitor, and the competitor with the most votes goes to the finals. And the last competitor standing gets $200. Right, that easy. We'll share all the competitors and a voting link in upcoming shows. But for today, just sit back and enjoy our first contender.
I'm the boy in your other phone, lighting up inside your drawer at home, all alone, pushing 40 in the friend zone. We talk and then you walk away every day. Oh, you don't think twice about me, and maybe you're right to doubt me, but if you give me just one night, you're gonna see me in a new light. Yeah, if you give me just one night, so I can see you in a new light. Take a ride up to Malibu. I just wanna stay and look at you, look at you. What would it matter if your friends knew? Who cares what other people say anyway? Oh, we can't go far from here and make a new world together, babe. 'Cause if you give me just one night, you're gonna see me in a new light. Yeah, if you give me just one night to meet you underneath the moonlight. Oh, I wanna take two. I wanna break through. I wanna know the real thing about you, so I can see you in a new light.
We'd love to see what you all submit. Let's see what you got. Remember in-person conversations? Crazy to think about it. In the archives, we found a segment about the art and war of casual conversation. And it turns out the advice in that segment is just as valid for today's Zoomageddon, the digital social landscape that we call human interaction these days. Let's journey back to 2015, when a very forward-thinking Stella chose a vacated library to tell us how to sound smart.
Hello and welcome to How to Sound Smart. I'm your host, Stella Green, and I'm going to tell you something that may shock you. In the pageant that is the casual social situation, it's important to remember that your conversational partners are really more your conversational rivals. That's right, everybody. Conversation is in fact a contest, and at the first sign of a factual error, the shark starts circling. See how I mixed metaphors just now? This was a conversation. That would have been the end of me. That's why today's lesson is keep it brief. Because the less time you spend talking, the less time they have to realize that your knowledge of any given topic essentially amounts to trivia. To help you master the art of not talking for a very long time, rather than give you a lot of information about one topic, I'm going to give you the key facts about 3 topics. The theme? Debunked scientific theories. Just say one, say it quick, and remember, you're on a battlefield. With sharks. Spontaneous generation theory. The initial question that sparked this theory was, where do maggots and rotting meat come from? And the perhaps unduly resounding answer from the scientific community was thin air, like literally nowhere. Circa 300 BCE, Aristotle observed that if meat was left out, maggots would appear in it. Definitely not understanding that maggots eventually mature into flies, and possibly not understanding that they can, move. He believed them to be generating spontaneously. Aristotle determined that some creatures had the ability to just sort of pop, and then they're alive. More intellectually put, that life can appear out of nowhere. Taking this idea and just running with it, during the 1600s, a scientist by the name of John Baptiste von Helmont put out what can only be described as spontaneous generation recipes. For example, how to make mice. First, find an open container. Then add a few grains of wheat and some dirty shirts. Don't have dirty shirts? Don't worry. These can be substituted for dirty rags. Now let these sit for 21 days, and when you come back, mice. Don't like mice? How about scorpions? To make a scorpion, first get a brick. Next, carve a hollow into that brick. Then fill that hollow with basil and cover the whole mess with another brick. Now you're going to want to let that sit for a few days so the basil fumes get a chance to leaven, and then you have a nice fresh scorpion with which to do whatever one does with a scorpion. Now, I don't want to harp on spontaneous generation theory too much because I understand that theories get disproven every day and everyone's just doing their best and all that, but do scorpions even like basil? Spontaneous human combustion. As you may or may not, but definitely should know, oxygen is involved in breathing. Oxygen is also involved in combustion, and when we discovered this around the late 1700s, we were faced with the burning question, How is oxygen a part of both combustion and breathing? Well, it's just gotta be that we're, like, full of fire, right? Like that there is a slow but steady combustion reaction taking place inside of all of us at all times that has hitherto gone unnoticed, right? Well, the scientists of yesteryear sure seem to think so, and this gave rise to the idea that should hot temper or fever flare up in one's person, they could just zing, go up in flames. Theories for how spontaneous combustion occurs range from the plausible, like static electricity buildup, to Larry Arnold. Mr. Arnold believed that there was a subatomic particle called a pyroton that could interact with cells to create an explosion. Now, I know this sounds a little far-fetched, but remember, fire is complex, and if you throw in there the idea of atoms, it's understandable how someone could still think this back in 1895. Oh, yeah, no. 1995. This theory was actually published in 1995, by which point we were several decades deep into the study of subatomic particles. We had email. It wasn't like a thing yet, but we had it. We knew what was in an atom, Larry Arnold. There is no excuse to be made for the pyroton. I also don't know how I got this, because I thought I was alone in this library? Vampires spread plague. We didn't understand fire, we didn't understand where scorpions came from, and we sure as heck didn't understand how decomposition worked. Let's set the scene. It's sometime during the Middle Ages, and you're on an island near Venice. Even though it's Venice, it's still the Middle Ages, so you're not having a great time. On this particular night, you and your buddy are carrying your recently deceased old Aunt So-and-so out to your local mass tomb. Again, this is the Middle Ages, so this is all pretty standard. That is until you open up that tomb. Inside, you find that, to your horror, almost all of the bodies have mouths drenched in... Oh my gosh, is that blood? Well, everyone at the time was pretty sure it was, and assuming the bodies hadn't been buried that way, that could only mean one thing. Vampires. The dead are rising! They're going out at night and feasting on the living! They must be the ones spreading the plague all over the gosh darn place! No, no, and no. It turned out that the dark red fluid was a dark red herring, or just a normal red herring. Yes, it was in fact not the blood of vampire victims. It was much worse than that. You see, when human bodies decay, their stomachs release what is called purge fluid, which is this lovely blackish red ooze that spills up out of the innards of corpses and leaks out of their mouths and or noses, usually and. The myth/scientific theory, pretty much tomato during the Middle Ages, went on to say that before vampires could exit their not-so-final resting places, they had to first chew through their burial shrouds. This idea came from the holes that purge fluid would wear in the cloth shrouds, making them look chewed on. Before a vampire is strong enough to chew through their shroud, all you have to do for protection is wear a shirt. That was a joke. This one isn't. If you're looking for a fix later down the line, cram a brick in their mouths. It seems to me that science has historically put more stock in the power of bricks than they were perhaps due. That concludes this episode of How to Sound Smart. Remember today's lesson? Keep it brief. And in that spirit, we're done.
Finally, we want to clap out for a different group of people making life in our community bearable. Today, let's all clap out for IT professionals in our schools who have worked so hard to bring courses online. We really appreciate being able to continue our studies, even if it's not at school.
That concludes this episode of Social Distance Television. Remember to stay safe
And check MCPS TV for more.